Welcome to this episode where I share Rita's inspirational journey. Rita Farrell and I have got to know each other quite well because we've been working together for a long time. And through it, she has also become someone who I would call my friend. She really, truly is inspirational because she has had so many challenges and she has also had to navigate the world of balancing family with school, with setting up a business. And she has, over time, she has reduced her teaching hours in the classroom. She has set up her tutoring business, which does really well. She has started hiring tutors, and she has set up a course for other tutors interested in A-level maths. So it's a really, really interesting journey, and I'm so delighted that Rita decides to be part of the podcast. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Upgrade Your Education Business podcast. I'm your host, Sumantha, and I'm so pleased you're here. As an education business owner myself and a former teacher, I understand the nuances that only apply to us. So in this podcast, I share fluff-free, tailored and actionable ideas that you can mould to suit your needs. If you'd like to take this conversation further, please do reach out. I would love to meet you. And finally, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review. That way, you'll be helping me help more people. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy.
I'm Rita. I run Rita's Maths Tutoring. My specialist areas are GCSE, IGCSE and A-level maths. I run CPD for Maths Tutors, upskilling to A-level maths. And in the past year, I began running a tutoring business in which I oversee a small team of maths and science tutors.
Very nice. And your journey's been has been so incredible to be on with you, to watch, to experience. We met on the 1st of March. He reminded me today, we met on the
Yeah,
1st of March,
yeah,
2023. So we've been working together for well over a year now.
yeah,
And you very quickly joined the Tutors Mastermind
yes,
and booked some one-to-ones with me. And I remember when we met, you were working 4 days a week in school. Is that
yeah,
right? Four
yes,
days? You're
yeah,
working 4 days a week in school. You've now dropped down to 2 days a week.
yeah,
But I know that one common theme in our conversation is stability.
yeah.
Stability has been extremely important for you. So my first question really is, how did you approach growing your tutoring business while you were working at the time 4 days a week to actually feel confident enough to drop down to 2 days a week?
Yeah. Um, I guess prior to 2020, to COVID, I was working in independent school. I was head of maths. I was raising my children on my own. So three of my children were living at home at that point. Um, and, it was really hard. That was a hard gig. And then, of course, it was compounded by the fact that my youngest child is autistic, but at the time undiagnosed. So she was experiencing huge, huge challenges, and I was being pulled in all directions. So the changes I made, some were forced, and I think, really, in reality, they were all kind of incremental. So at first, in order to try to get a hold on my family life and to try to create stability and get the things my child needed. So at first, I stepped down as a head of maths and reduced my teaching days. So at that point, I reduced all the way to 3 days. So, of course, raising a family on your own, you're not going to pay your bills if you only show up at school 3 days a week. So I'd always been tutoring. Most teachers do a little bit because you'll always have people asking you. So I started doing a lot more tutoring, quite a bit of daytime tutoring at the time on the days that I wasn't in school. But I wasn't thinking, oh, this is what I'll do, because I couldn't think about what will I do? What do I want to do? I was literally just firefighting all of the time. So um, any SEN parent out there will know what I'm talking about when I say I then went down the long and very twisty road of securing a EHCP, and then I from there went down a longer road more twisty, of taking my counsel to tribunal to get an appropriate education for my youngest child. In the meantime, still going to school, still tutoring, still had other children to think about. So when I came through that, I didn't come through it like a champion. I didn't come through it waving flags and, you know, cheering. You know, I was quite battered and bruised and absolutely exhausted. So at first, it was very much about just being in recovery mode. But what I had noticed as time was going by was that I found myself thinking, I um, I want to live differently. And in all of that time, I also switched schools, and they didn't want 3 days; they wanted four. So that demand um, had gone up. But I kept thinking, I want to live differently. I want to like my life, and I want to live a life that gives me time. So around the summer of 2022, I decided, well, I'll set up as a tutor. That's what I'll do. Come out of education, I'll set up as a tutor. So for that academic year, I continued to work in school. I created a website. I bought a book on how to be an online tutor. I did all of the things that the book told me to do. It told me to set up a website. It told me to set up a Facebook page. It told me to join lots of Facebook groups. And I did all of those things, except I probably joined way too many groups. Um, I was posting the wrong stuff. So I was just advertising. And now I've learned since that's not what draws people to you. And I'm not a salesperson. So it didn't even feel very comfortable. So um, I knew that I needed it to change. But one of the other things I was doing was I was following people. And I was following people that I thought, you know, I really like what they do. I really like what they do. And I want to try to create a frame in which I can do that. And I was listening to podcasts. So I was sort of like immersing myself in that tutoring world. And then I had been following you, I had been listening to your podcasts. And I remember our first meeting. I didn't come to that meeting to be sold anything. I was already on board. I already knew that I want this woman to show me how to run a business. And I remember in our first, then that day, I got off the discovery call and I joined the mastermind. And then a week later, I had my first one-to-one coaching session. And I said to you, I know what I'm good at. I'm a really good teacher, but I have no idea about how to run a business. And then once I started working with you in that year, I decided, right, you can't do this with 4 days at school. So I thought, I've got to come out. But like you said, stability matters. When you're raising a family on your own, stability really matters. So I went from 4 to 2 days simply because I knew 2 days would pay my mortgage. And it wasn't so much about a confidence, it was about, I guess they're the same thing. It was a belief. Look, if I take care of that, if I have school taking care of that big bill that comes every month, I just knew I'll take care of the rest. That whatever this journey is, I will be resourceful and I will make it work.
Thank you for sharing. I was
Yeah.
gripped. I was absolutely gripped, even though I knew a lot of that. I really like your logical approach, actually, that you said that I dropped down to two because I knew it'd pay my mortgage.
Yeah.
It's a really, really great approach, one that I didn't really have the foresight to take. I mean, I just left.
Yeah.
My situation was a bit different. But I do like that logical approach because I think it's quite important to have something tangible. So you're
Yeah.
making a educated decision.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think the part that people struggle with is the lack of guarantee.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I work
Yeah.
with a lot of tutors who really desperately want to leave and they're actually earning enough to leave. But the thing that's making them hesitate is, but what if this doesn't continue?
Yeah. Yeah.
So where do you feel like that self-belief to say that I'll work out the rest, it will work out? Where do you think that came from?
I guess I guess at that point I had been through so much that required being very resourceful, and I'd been through situations where actually I've gone into like the EHCP, the tribunal, with no knowledge, none whatsoever. So I knew how to research and um, just I knew how to arm myself with the knowledge that I would require. Um, so in terms of how did I feel confident that there'd be a guarantee of the income? Part of it too is also from being in the tutoring world. And what I think now compared to before is there is so much work out there. There is so much work out there that I just, and now one of the things I believe is the work won't dry up. It won't dry up. Education won't disappear. Certainly, maths education, it's not going to disappear. I do believe that there's an absolute wealth of work out there, and it's about knowing how to tap into it. And I remember you telling me, you know, I was doing all the things. I had my website, I had my Facebook page. And I remember one of the first things you taught me was about visibility. And I had said to you, you know, I'm a really good teacher. And you said, well, if nobody knows about you, then you're just the world's best kept secret. So it's about having a belief and an understanding that there's plenty of work out there, but you've got to know how to tap into it. It won't some work just comes to you. You know, sometimes you get inquiries and you're not even really sure where they came from, but you do have to get out there. You do have to put yourself out there. And that can be I for me that was another difficult thing to to put myself out there, and that was another kind of mindset shift that I had to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I remember us having that conversation and
Yeah.
also the subsequent work we did. And a lot of it was around mindset, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes we just spent an hour just talking and there
Yeah.
was nothing actionable. There was
Yeah.
nothing strategic. We just talked because of that mindset shift. And actually, I think it's so important. And particularly, I know how much you've worked on it and continue to,
Yeah.
that I would love to ask you a little bit about that. Before I do, though, I want to ask, you are now in a situation where you've expanded your business.
Yeah.
You hire tutors, you've set
Yeah.
up a course for tutors.
Yeah.
When did that switch happen, do you think, where you went from saying 2 days a week at school is going to pay my mortgage, the rest I'll just work out.
Yeah.
When did tutoring stop being this thing that was just that was supplementing your income versus something you started to see as a business that could expand and grow? When do you think that happened, and what really inspired you to choose those specific ways to expand?
I think a lot of it happened sort of as a result of opportunity just presenting itself. So, for example, the A level maths for tutors course just resulted from conversations. And I was on a group, a WhatsApp group for female maths tutors, not all maths, female tutors, any kind of tutor, didn't have to be maths. But there was one Sunday morning, there was a conversation going on about maths tutors in that group who wanted to tutor A level but hadn't. And someone on the group said, oh, I spent a year working with a maths tutor teaching me A level maths, and now I tutor it. And other people were saying, oh, I wish I could do that. And I just thought, well, why can't I do that? So I just put in a message saying, I'd really love to run something like this as a group and give people the confidence to teach A level maths. And actually, the response was really positive. I didn't even really market it much, it was quite informal at first. And I remember when I first started, I remember you telling me that I was building the plane as I was flying it. And I think that was true, except I'd always at each point built enough of the plane to get to the next point. But I think running that course also helped with my own confidence, because it's a very different thing to put yourself out there amongst your peers and present yourself as an expert in that area. And then in terms of hiring tutors and deciding, you know what, I'll try having an education business, that was also opportunity, because maths teachers, we get asked all the time, do you tutor science? Science tutors get asked all the time, do you tutor maths? And I used to always say, no, I don't, but let me see who I can find for you. And then in the past year, you know, people were asking that question, and I thought, instead of just giving them a phone number, why don't I do something with this? Why don't I see what I can create? So it began with one science tutor, one parent, and that's the thing. Everything can grow, particularly if you put some time and energy into it. And lots of things begin just with an idea or a conversation. And that doesn't mean, oh, look, you're really lucky you had this idea and it's all worked out. Most things begin with one idea, one conversation, or one meeting. And then if you do the research and put the work in, then that idea can become um, so much more than you expected. So um, yeah, it's a really big journey, I think, and I think for anyone embarking on the journey, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, how do I want to live, and what do I want my life to look like, and how much risk am I prepared to take? And I used to read other people's stories, listen to their stories, and often, you know, they'd say, yes, they left and it was fine. They left with nothing to go to and it was fine. And some people have to leave. But I'd always been looking for stories from people who had left and were doing it totally on their own, and also trying to raise a family, because I needed that reassurance that if even if there's no other income in your house, you can create a household income by doing this on your own.
I was just taking some notes there. A couple of things you said there. So I like what you said about how, your advice would be to decide how you want to live. I think that's
Yeah,
really, really important because I think we often focus on the bottom line, but we
yeah,
don't focus on what we're willing to do or unwilling to do to get to that
yeah,
bottom line.
yeah,
And I often use the phrase, or the language of designing your business.
yeah,
And I feel quite passionate about that because I think that when you look around, it can be a minefield because you've got messages coming your way of, this is how few hours I teach, and look how much I've
yeah,
exceeded my
yeah,
my teaching income. Or
yeah,
there are other people who say something else, and there are just lots and lots of messages around. And it's easy to get dazzled by those messages or to get really immersed.
yeah,
And I spent the other day talking one of my clients down because she was panicking and she felt like she was a failure because she had taken all of these courses in the past that had promised certain things
yeah,
and she wasn't achieving it. And I had to really bring the conversation down to forget about the headlines for these courses that
mm,
you've taken. What do you want to do about this?
yeah,
You've learned something from all of them. I'm not going to say that my course is the best and you didn't learn anything from anyone else. What did you learn? Have you taken action? What are you willing to do? What are you unwilling to do? But most importantly, what does this mean to you in your life?
yeah,
And that's such an important thing to consider because otherwise we get very fixated on the headlines. So,
yes,
you might say, I'm working a 50-hour week. Does that make me a really bad business person when other people are talking about working, I'm exaggerating here, but 3 hours a week and earning
yeah,
£1 million? But when you take life out of it, you're losing such a huge part of the context that's important. So I think it is a really important way to stay grounded and centered.
yeah,
Otherwise, you compare yourself often with other people, but you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know what their life is like. You don't know how they work and all of those things. So I'm really glad you mentioned it. One thing I would like to ask you a little bit more about, though, is you said how, well, I remember that when you were launching, when we were talking about your A-level maths for tutors
yeah,
course, presenting yourself among your peers and just generally presenting yourself as that expert in that area was really hard. it was a really hard mindset. Well, there were a lot of mindset challenges, shall we
Yeah.
say. How did you and how do you navigate that? What kind of things have helped? And, just will you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I suppose when we first started working together, I remember sharing my screen and showing you my Facebook business page and being really embarrassed, thinking it is such a Mickey Mouse of a business page. And I remember, you taught me about visibility. I remember you said, I think we need to turn the heat up. And one of the things I learned from that is you can take a small action. So becoming more visible didn't take a lot of time, but it had a big impact. It had a really big impact. And it changed for me at that point from, yeah, there's some work coming in to there's lots of work coming in. Um, and I used to at first feel embarrassed on the Facebook business page because it was all ads. But then you taught me that the posts are not supposed to be selling. They're supposed to be about connecting with people, talking about what you do, who you do it for, how you do it, and letting people get to know you. So when I stopped trying to be a salesperson on my Facebook business page, it all became much easier. And then I just became really relaxed about it. But then I started using LinkedIn, and that was another case of having to deal with this kind of like imposter syndrome because LinkedIn, you were very much amongst your peers. And I do still feel that uh, it still takes bravery for me to put myself out on LinkedIn. But of course, to reach the professional world, which is what I was trying to do with the A-level maths course, that's where I had to be. Um, so I know it involved lots of conversations with you about trying to just get over that hurdle of overthinking it or overthinking that it's been judged. Um, and I actually had a conversation with a tutor recently who I'd messaged her in LinkedIn and then I hadn't heard and I texted her and she said she didn't use LinkedIn anymore and asked her why. And she said because it made her feel like a failure because you see what everyone else is doing. And I knew what she meant because I follow people that I think are doing things really well. So you're not following people who are doing things less well than you are. You're following people who are doing things better than you are. But I've changed my mindset about that to be okay, they're ahead of me on this journey. So now when I look at what other people are doing, I don't think, oh gosh, how embarrassing, look at what I'm doing. I think, so that's what I can get to. That's what I can aim for later. But the important thing is that in any given time, you do the parts you can do. You do what you can do. There is no point comparing because there's always going to be people doing far better. And maybe they want different things, you know. Um, so I guess it it is about you have to work on your mindset. It's very different to being a school teacher because you don't have to sell yourself at school. The school fills up your classrooms for you. So, but really, I guess you've got to try and take the emotion out of it because what you're selling is what you can do for people rather than yourself. I mean, we are our business, but you have to try to remove some of the emotion about it, which is hard because our emotion is caught up in what we do and we're passionate about what we do. But you've got to remove the emotion from thinking that it's going to be judged.
Yeah. I felt really sad when you said that that
Yeah,
tutor felt like a failure.
yeah,
I think, I've got, yeah, that makes me really, really sad. And it actually just, it ignites that fire in my belly that's already there to change this narrative.
yeah,
I talk about this a lot through social media, a lot on LinkedIn about how there really isn't one way to do it. And I think it goes beyond comparing yourself. I think it's about how we are getting very accustomed to those dazzling headlines
yeah, yeah,
and there's no context behind it. I've been in Facebook groups, for example, before where people have said, I'm thinking of leaving teaching. can tutoring really replace my income?
Yeah.
Can I, and you'll get tons and tons of, yeah, I only do this number of hours and I've exceeded and all of this.
Yeah.
And what's not talked about is the context. Well, what does fully booked look like to you?
Yeah.
That matters. How many hours a week do you work on the business? Because it's not just teaching.
Yeah.
How about everything else that you do? Do you get all that work through agencies? Do you get it independently? Does your partner, have you got a joint income in your house? I mean, all
Yes.
of these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
We've got children,
Yes.
everything
Yeah.
makes such a big difference that forms part of the picture, but all of that's missed out. And I'm not blaming people for not talking about it because it's personal. You may
Yeah.
not want to share all of that in a Facebook thread, for example. But the point is, because we are so used to being sold to using these dazzling headlines, we
Yeah.
forget the context. And that's really sad. And I know that you and I have talked a lot about mindset and that imposter and that feeling of being
Yeah.
judged. And in fact, just the other day, we had a conversation about the pressure on the word expert.
Yeah.
You were feeling so
Yes.
uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
And so it's an ongoing journey, really, isn't it? So something you also said was how you shouldn't compare yourself. And another angle to really look at is that you are also always going to be further ahead than someone else, and that
Yeah.
someone else might be looking
Yeah.
at you.
Yeah.
And so yeah, comparison can be a real trap. And that's why, just circling back to what you said near the beginning of this episode, where you said that you really asked yourself, what do I want my life to look like?
Yeah.
That should steer you, and that should ground you. That's your anchor. I
Yeah.
remember speaking to a client, and she was saying, I'm just feeling really down about the business now. I've invested so much in support, and I'm still not getting that steady stream of inquiries, and I'm
Mm.
not making X amount of money. Yes, I'm earning more, but I'm not making the target that I wanted. And I just said, why did you do this? Why did you set up your business? Remind me. And she said, because I've got two very, very young children and I wanted to spend
Mm.
more time with them. And I said, are you spending more time with them? And she said, yes.
Yeah.
I was like, right, there's your success.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that, all of this is really what you've said is really cohesive, because you do have to stay very grounded and you do have to stay very secure with your why, your personal why.
Yeah.
You
I
touched
think
on,
too you have to,
sorry.
sorry, you kind of have to slimline the advice you take as well, because there's lots of groups for tutors, and lots of them are very, very good. But what I always noticed from the beginning was when someone asks a question and they're genuinely asking about maybe the logistics of tutoring, that you get so many answers. And I just think, how does anybody think clearly? That you get so much response because everybody wants to say, look, this is a good way to do it. And I think, so when I was working with you and in the mastermind, that I kind of take that as that's kind of the holy grail of my advice. And then the rest is around that. But I think that I've got one place I come back to where I really trust the advice. I won't get bombarded with it. So I think, in terms of things to do, if you're new to it, if you're not naturally confident, it is really good to seek out support that you trust. Um, and you can get so much of that. So yes, you can get loads of free support and groups, but you're going to get maybe too much of it, and too many answers and too much variation in answers to the things you want to know. Whereas, um, because I am quite logical, I just wanted I just wanted someone to give me a structure. I wanted a structure and a pathway and something I could follow, rather than thinking, oh, well, that person said that and that person said that. Which would I do?
Yeah, I'm very humbled by what you just said. Thank you. And you're absolutely right. I think, I often refer to it as making decisions by committee.
Yeah,
It's not a great idea to do it because I suppose everyone wants to help. And so they're talking from their perspective and their
yes, yeah,
experience, but they don't know what challenges they're going to face because of those decisions yet.
yeah, yeah,
And they can only talk from that perspective. So, everyone has a really different, they're in different stages of their journey in terms of mindset. When I left teaching, I definitely wasn't as insightful as you because I was very much like, I need to do this myself. I need to work this out by myself. It was
Mm.
almost the stubbornness in me.
Yeah,
And it almost felt like asking for help felt like I was conceding defeat. I was saying,
yeah,
okay, I haven't managed to do this myself. And so for me, that was my big mindset shift, that actually investing in myself reduces my trial and error time.
yeah,
It's a wise business decision.
yeah,
We could all work this out by ourselves. The difference is how many mistakes are you willing to make
yeah,
before to make those mistakes, and how much trial and error do you want to go through? And have you got the resilience? Have you
yes,
got the resilience to say 2 years later, after trying all these things, I'm still not where I want to be? Are you then going to have the resilience to try yet another thing? And all
yeah,
of those things I think come in the mix. And I would say I was quite resilient, or I am quite resilient. But when I noticed that difference with investing and in the right support, you have to
yeah,
absolutely trust
yeah,
that person because, I've asked you to go out of your comfort zone
yeah,
multiple times.
yeah,
And there's no way you would have been able to do that if we didn't have trust in our relationship.
yes, yeah,
So I think that's really important. And, I think that one of the reasons I really wanted you to be on the podcast is because Rita, you have and have had such an interesting journey, quite unique in comparison to a lot of people I speak to, in terms of the fires you've walked through. And I don't expect you to talk about all of those, but the thing I wanted to ask was that what are those really big mindset, I want to say shifts, but things that you have to almost keep checking in with yourself on? What do you have to almost maintain to continue growing your business? Because in a year and a bit, you've gone from 4 days a week doing a bit of
yeah,
tutoring on the side to 2 days a week in school, hiring tutors. You've now got a team, and you are now about to run your second cohort
yeah,
of a course that's for tutors.
yeah,
That's massive growth.
yeah.
How did you and how do you stay on that growth track? How do you overcome those wobbles that happen along the way?
Yeah, the wobbles do happen. My confidence is not rock solid. Um, I guess one of the things in terms of mindset shift is I've stopped being afraid of decisions. And I think actually most of our decisions, even if they're wrong, don't have drastic outcomes. So I've stopped being afraid of deciding to do things. And I guess that's coming from a confidence. So I feel like, look, I can try this out. I can move forward in this direction. Um, Maybe I will be wrong. I mean, I used to be really afraid of spending money on things and think
Yeah.
if it didn't work out, I've wasted that, and that's so bad, and I'll have been bad. And now I think, within reason, okay, I've decided I'm going to spend on this. I think it's going to be a really good thing for this business, a really positive outcome. And if it isn't, I will still have learned something. So I feel like I'm just less afraid of decisions. And rather than being kind of held back by trying to make decisions, now I kind of look at things and think, What else can I do here? Where else can I go with this? What else would I like to do?" And I'm certainly in terms of how do I want to live, I'm still designing my life, but I can see it taking shape, and I much prefer the shape of it now than the shape of it 2 years ago. Um, but in terms of the big mindset shifts, it's about not being afraid, not being afraid. And it is scary because you're self employed, but just not being afraid and making your decisions. And if you're sure of them, then yes, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and spend that bit of money. And I think I've been looking that I haven't really spent money on anything that I shouldn't have. But every time I spent money, I was worried that maybe I shouldn't be. So I've stopped doing that. I've stopped and I've started doing, you would talk to me about automating things, and I was thinking, no, 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 it's fine. I can do it all. And the invoicing, and I'm fine doing that. I hated doing it. I hated doing it. So now I have a bookkeeper, and
Yeah.
it's costing so little. And I was like, why was I so reluctant? So I'm learning to just shift that hesitant thing that I've got and just think, look, where do you want it to go? And just move forward a little bit. And very few of our decisions have big drastic outcomes. There's no like majorly big spends in setting up tutoring business. There are things you've got to spend money on, but it's not like setting up a restaurant or something. You're not talking about thousands. There's no major big spend. So, you know, I guess at every point the reality was uh, I took the risks that I felt I could take, and then that gave me confidence to take more risks.
What a great note to end this episode on. Such great advice. And thank you for sharing things that I know are so personal as well. I love that you said that the first thing you did was you just started having more confidence in your decisions. You removed the fear.
Yeah,
And it's a really good point that, it's very rare that a decision that you make as a small business owner about your business is going to have this huge, drastic
yeah, yeah,
consequence. And it made me think back to things that I've said to people where, they might be working on, say, some social media marketing, let's say their Facebook page, and they're like, oh, do I post this? Should I put this picture on? Should I put that? And I'm like, you can't break it. You're not
yeah,
going to break face, nothing's going to happen if you make the wrong decision, and
yeah,
just see it as one big experiment.
yeah,
Try it, see what happens.
yeah,
And I think overcoming that's really hard. And I think it's hard for everyone. I mean, it's certainly hard for me. I still struggle with new things. I'm the same as you, where I think a million times before I spend some money in my business still, even though I'm more confident to spend it now because it's never been a complete waste. I still think about it.
yeah, yeah,
But, I really love how you've got this lovely blend of logic, but also you are thoughtful as
yeah.
well. You do think quite deeply. And I just think what you've shared on here has been so valuable. I could spend another hour speaking to you,
Mhm.
really. So I love speaking to you. So Rita, thank you so much for sharing your journey and sharing so many useful insights today. Are there any final thoughts you would like to share with people who are listening who might be where you were when we first met, where they wanted to change something in their lives, like how many hours they're teaching? And I still remember you asking me, Samantha, just be honest with me. Is this
Yeah,
viable? Is this
yeah,
going to happen?
yeah.
How did you go from asking that question to the belief that it will be fine?
Because I knew what I wanted. I knew what I wanted. So if you had said, no, it's not viable, I would have been really disappointed, talk, but I don't want to stay as I am. I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted to live my life differently. So, and I knew when I did step down to 2 days, I didn't think, yeah, it's all going to be great. But I knew I had to find out. I knew I had to find out. And, now the things I love being outside, and I'm the ultimate morning person. I don't think a 5 a.m. wake up is too early. So
That's the
now
middle of the night for me.
I know when I head out on a Monday morning running into the woods, I always think, this is what you were talking about, Rita. This is what you were talking about. Not when I check my bank account,
Yeah.
out there and I'm thinking, yes, I'm running. I'm not getting ready for school. I am running and I'm loving it. And I think the main message I would give people is don't be afraid. I am the world's biggest scaredy cat. I am absolutely afraid of loads of things. Could give you a whole list. But just like you can't break Facebook, you're probably not going to break yourself either. Don't be afraid. We have so many options. There's so many ways to make a living, and there's so many ways to have a life. You just got to ask yourself, what's that life? What makes me sit back and think, "Do you know what? Look what I like living like this." And then once you know what you want, you will do the things you need to do. Maybe not fast, maybe you will still do them with doubts and fears. But once you know what you want, We can all do it. Of course we can. You've seen it over and over. We can all do this. You just need to get yourself at least one cheerleader on the sideline and you'll be okay.
You know, I'm not going to add anything to that. That was absolutely perfect, Rita. Thank you so much for being on the
Yeah,
podcast.
thank you.
Would you like to take this discussion further? Perhaps you have some questions or you'd like more ideas on tailoring your business. If so, book a free discovery call through the link in the show notes.